Sweet. Thank you guys. So also being live means you guys are listening, especially if you're right up front and I can hear you talking over me. There's just a tiny bit of setup that we need to do on our Illustrator in order to get all the tools that we need for the grain texture effect. This is the one we're going to be focusing on primarily today. I don't know where to put my captions so they're not in the way. We'll just pull them over here. Okay. There's a couple quick panels that we need to pop out. This is what mine looks like with Essentials Classic. The ones that you need to enable by going to Window, because that's got everything that we need to work with here. We need the Appearance tab, starting in the A's. It's going to pop out like this. You want to pull this guy off to the side so that it's its own window over here. Next, we need the Color, moving in alphabetical order. Same deal, just like you're pulling tabs off of a web browser. Just yank that to the side so that it's floating like this. Hi, good morning. So we got Appearance, we got Color. We also are going to need Gradient. So we're going to pull Gradient out. And the fourth and final one that we need to separate is Layers. So Layers is already enabled by default in this panel right here. But by going Window, Layers, sorry, that's View. Window, Layers, it's going to pop it out where it's usually connected. We want to remove it though. See, I did it wrong right there. If you have the little like button that comes out, that is okay. You just need to click on the button and then pull the tab so that the button part goes away. You should have these 4 windows out, loose, because we're going to rearrange our display a little bit so that we can use, we're going to be using all of these in order for to create our texture today. There's actually one more I just remembered. It is transparency. So if you go to Window and then we'll go to the T's, which is, why is it not here? Maybe it's here. Transparency is one that lives, yeah. So transparency, it looks like this Venn diagram right here. It's got the 2 little overlapping pieces. It's usually connected to stroke in this group right here with gradient as well. We're gonna pull that one off as well, so that we have 5 floating windows, 5 important tools that we're gonna need for today. The next step is we're gonna rearrange these tools in a way so that they're not taking up our entire artboard right here. And I totally forgot. Oh no, we are recording. Okay, good. They're not taking up our whole artboard here. This is the way that you can start customizing Illustrator to your preferred layout or your just depending on different tools or different sort of effects that you're going for. You can customize it. I just use the Essentials Classic, so you always have a quick reference. So anyways, if you ever want to close panels, there's these 2 little arrows right here, the same way that you can make the toolbar larger or smaller. You can also hide all this extra information that we're not really focused on right now. And then if you grab on the tabs with the names where it says Layers, Color, Appearance, Gradient, whatever, if you click and drag it by the name and hover it over to one of the sides, you see how it turns blue? See that blue looking bar right there? If you let go, when you have a big blue bar like this, it's going to add that panel as its own sort of separate window right here. And you want to do that one with the Layers or with Appearance. Well, probably actually just Layers, because we're going to be working a lot with our Layers panel today and creating something called masks, which we'll get more into in Photoshop. But that is also part of today as well. You can, now that we have this column set up for Layers, you can also put smaller, let's see if it doesn't want to work. Okay. It's finicky. It doesn't work exactly the same way every time, but some of these panels will allow you to stack them on top of one another. So like if I take Appearance, for example, and I do the blue bar again, it's going to add Appearance to the side here, and I should be able to take Gradient and put it, this was just working this morning. Why is it not working now? Come on. Let me put it halfway there. Okay, so sometimes it'll let you attach it to the bottom here because we don't want to make just this wall of single page pieces, excuse me. So there we go. So color works for some reason. If we put it underneath transparency, you can see we get that same blue bar effect once more, and that will add color in the available space a little bit more than what we need. Let's see if it works for gradient too. It does work for gradient. Okay, awesome. So this, let me see if I can get appearance to go now. Okay, it's just gonna be mean. Gotcha. All right. But what you want to be seeing, oh, gradient came loose. It's finicky, and it's super fun how it's being finicky right now. But you want yours to look something like this, where you have the layers taking up a wider section of your workspace. And then you can have transparency and appearance be tabs next to one another, and then color and gradient separated in this manner. And then you can resize a little bit further and make it just a teeny bit smaller so you can actually see what I'm doing. But these are the tools that we need to have set up in order to most optimally do the texture effects that I'm going to show you today. It's referenced in this video right here. This is where I was taught how to do these effects. So we're going to take a simple, very clean digital shape and add this really interesting shading to it. It's called stipple shading, with a variety of effects and masks to create that realism, to create that tactility, is the word that means like you can touch it, or you could imagine how it feels. We're going for something like this today, as well as we are on 6.3. That is this video right here in your agenda. And then there's also Mr. Hendrix's video, which is a little bit longer, that walks you through the entirety of setup for 6.3 as he did it. It's a little bit differently from ours, but pretty much the same. So if you're interested in that, or you're still feeling stuck, that is a great tutorial to look at. So what we're doing here is creating the illusion of texture and value at the same time to give something that really quick 3D effect. And in order to do that, we have to start with some type of artwork. You guys have these on your scenes, I imagine already. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to start with this yellow square with a black stroke around the outside edge. One more thing before we start getting into the actual effect portion. If you click on these 3 lines next to the color tab, there's a button that says show options. You want to click that button, because that allows you these extra sliders that will let you more in detail adjust different aspects of the color. Mine are currently set to HSB, which is going to be useful for this assignment, but you could also do RGB, CMYK. Oh, well, there we go. CMYK could work too, but I find HSB to be the most useful, because the point of these assignments in this project is manipulating the lights and giving the illusion of depth and stuff. And HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness is all going to be related to how bright a color is. Hi, good morning. We have new seats. I think you're actually in the same spot. Let me see. Yeah, you're right there. Okay. So now that we've got everything set up, we've got a shape of some kind, we have artwork of some variety, we're going to start doing the thing with the grain effect. So what the video outlines is, first you need to make a copy of whatever shape you're trying to add grain to. So if you look at my layers panel, if we expand it, the only thing in there right now is this rectangle. I wish there was a way, actually, can I make this bigger? Oh, sweet. Okay. Let's try that. No, that didn't do what I needed. That's fine. But you can see inside of layer 1, when you expand it, the only thing that's there currently is this rectangle. What we're going to do is copy and paste this rectangle, or this shape, whatever you're trying to add texture to, in a very specific way. So you do Control-C like normal, but instead of Control-V to just put it back on the artboard somewhere, we're actually going to go Control-F. And when you go Control-F, nothing happens in the artboard visually, but what it does is it adds a copy directly on top of the other one. It's called paste in place. So if you're ever trying to copy and paste something without moving it, like for example, this assignment, or you're creating some transparency effects. Control C, Control F instead of Control V is going to get you to where you need to be. All right, so now we have these two rectangles. Hi, good morning. We have these two rectangles. Thank you. We're going to make the top rectangle, the one that appears first in the order on the layers, we're going to make it a little bit of a brighter yellow, because value is that relationship from light to dark or brightness to not brightness. And we're going to communicate that with a lighter color. And this is where the HSB aspect comes into play. So if you click on your first rectangle in your layers right here, we're actually going to do this the opposite way and go to the bottom rectangle and reduce its brightness. Okay. You can see that the one on top is not actually, we want the darker one. Okay, I want this rectangle selected. By clicking on the square next to it, I'm definitely selecting the bottom rectangle. I'm going to reduce the brightness on that. You can see that nothing happens to the yellow rectangle, but this one's turning kind of like an olive green, because I'm reducing the B value to about 60% on that. And then we can look at this rectangle, select it, and see that that B value brightness is 100%. So if I pull this to the side, you can see that there's two different shades of rectangles happening here. So with the top rectangle, the brighter one, the one that's above the other one, the one that we pasted in front, you're going to go to the transparency panel that we set up in this manner and click on this Make Mask button. When you click Make Mask, it's going to turn some type of invisible, and you're going to see the yellow square and the black square. The way that masks work, before we get into it in more depth in Photoshop, is that when anything is set to a mask and it has black, that turns invisible. Black conceals and white reveals is the way that it's set up. But what we want to do is invert this mask. So far, nothing happens until we move down to our gradient section and click on anywhere in the gradient slider. Oh, hold on, I skipped a step. The reason I had you pull the transparency panel up is that when you click these different windows, you see how my layers panel changes on this side? This is kind of like switching modes when we're working with the regular square inside of the artboard, or when we're working with the transparency effect that we're working on creating right now. It's kind of like a toggle switch. And what you want to do is be toggled into the mask part, the right-handed square, so that when you click layers, it says opacity mask, like this. Now what you'll do is go to appearance. You can see there's a fill right here. Even though the fill is this kind of banana yellow, it's not appearing on the artboard here. If you click the fill box and then go down and click on this gradient slider, it's going to add a gradient fill to that mask. This is hard to conceptualize because nothing is changing visually inside of our artboard. However, if we go back to the transparency panel, you can see that this mask is now filled with a gradient of some kind, even though it doesn't look like it. But if we go back to appearance, you can see that the fill is set to a gradient. And this is important because gradients allow that gradual change from either a high amount of light to a low amount of light, or a high amount of texture to a low amount of texture, as if it was receiving light in real life. So after all these steps, we're still working. You're going to go to Effects and then down to Texture. Where's Texture? There's Texture, second to last. And we're going to do Grain. So we're applying the grain to the mask, which has the gradient fill. And all of this is setting up a way for us to customize how our grain behaves. And it's the idea of setting up more in the front so that it's easier to use and experiment with when you get to that point. So when you click Texture, Effect, Texture, Grain, you're going to get this window to pop up. And it's extremely small for some reason. So let's zoom in a little bit. Hold on, I might be in, let me make sure I'm not in inches real quick. Oh, I'm in inches. Why is it so small? Okay, it should not be that small. Let me see. this is not doing what I need it to right now. Okay. Let's just try it and see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna go texture, grain, and it's gonna pop up in this window. It should have way more grain options. I have to zoom into 1000%. So something's going on with my sizing of my document, even though it's set to inches. I'm not really sure. But these grain settings right here are the same. You can adjust the intensity of the grain, how grainy something is. I think it starts at like 20 or 30 or something. This is gonna adjust how much grain happens. And then the contrast should, if it was working, yeah, nothing's appearing on mine. The contrast should be adjusting the relationship from light to dark, right? Higher brightness colors, lower brightness colors. The same way that a gradient slider kind of adjusts the midpoint. You also want to change this grain type to stippled. Stippled is that the shading that uses dots. So we're going to set it to stippled. Click OK. And then why is this not working? Hold on. Let me try something real quick. Sit tight. This is not doing what I need it to. Okay, so I'm gonna make a mask out of this one, invert it, select it. Did I skip this step? I think I skipped this step. Okay. So now if I go to apply appearance, set that to gradients. There we go. So now something's happening a little bit more. On the Zoom room, you can see it much better. You can see how it has a the dark to light relationship through the gradient. And if I go to transparency and click on that, okay, cool. Now it's working a little better. If I go to effects, texture, grain, there we go. Okay, that's a lot more what I'm looking for. I think I was applying grain on an empty mask. Okay, so I think I'm going too fast anyway. Let me start from the top. Not all the way from the top. But we have our rectangle here, right? Control C, Control F to paste that rectangle in front. Hi, good morning. And then once you've pasted that rectangle in front, we'll go back into the setup. Sorry about that, you guys. It didn't do what I needed it to. Totally my fault. Okay, so what you actually need to do, now that you have your two rectangles, everything up until that point was correct. We're gonna click the Make Mask button. It's gonna have this black square like this. Check the box that says Invert Mask. And then before you do anything else with the gradient, the fill, the whatever, do another Control C, Control F, because that is gonna paste the mask on top of itself and allow us to get to what I need you to see. So if you can see in this layers panel, it says opacity mask. That's that toggle. When you switch between the two different forms, let's say, you want to make sure that it says opacity mask before you do anything. So we're going to click Control C, Control F. It's going to add another yellow rectangle, the lighter version of the rectangle, into our opacity mask like this, which is now where we can go to the Appearance tab, click on the Fill button, and then finally click on this gradient bar. When you do that, if we switch back to the alternative, I skipped the step where it was dark on the bottom. There we go. So now that we have an actual gradient gradienting, you can see on the Zoom room much better how this is starting to take form. It's starting to have light sort of interact with it, just like the real world would anticipate. Now what we can do is by going to click on this box and then clicking on this gradient toggle to go back into our opacity mask. Then we can go to Effect, Texture, Grain, and it gives us this cool live version of how the grain is going to happen, how the texture is going to be applied to this specific gradient mask. So the contrast, you can see, adjusts how much of a solid black or a solid dark color fill is happening on the side. So if you go 100% contrast, it's split down the middle. 0% contrast is going to blend across the entire way. And then you can adjust the intensity of the grain. If you want more intense or less intense. If you're just trying to put some grain on the edge of something, maybe where it intersects with something else, you can mess around with this as long as your grain type is set to stippled. Once you click OK, it's going to apply that texture over the gradient mask and give this shape. It's a little bit pixelated. Give this shape a little bit more of some realism. You can see it happening here in the little preview, that the grain is applied over the mask in a way that you can adjust. So this is cool. This is a lot of setup because it's now adjustable. We've got this layer over top of our artwork. We don't lose any of the work that we did to create the squares, because the squares on your end are going to be a lot more complex, a lot more detailed drawings, so to speak. The cool part now is if you press the G key, you can click and drag this grain pattern. You can click and drag this texture in a variety of different ways that you can adjust, how much lightness there is, where the darkness begins, the relationship between those two. You can adjust the angle. It's a very customizable tool that's going to add a lot of realism to our designs. And the way that you do this is the way that you actually apply it to 6.3 is creating those relationships between lightness and darkness. Okay, these are natural scenes. They're going to be pretty well lit by the sun, of course, but there's still going to be a little bit of shadow. There's still going to be relationships between light parts and dark parts of your image. And you can use gradients and this long texture tutorial to give it that much more realism, give it that much more sort of space and visual appeal. And you can see that this is the actual grain pattern. If I click and drag it, because I have it selected, I'm able to move that mask around. You don't want to do that too much. You want to make sure that these stay linked. But if you click back into the square dimension, away from the grain dimension, you can move it. Well, okay, that's not supposed to happen. Let me move it as one piece. Why are we doing that? Okay. Okay, hang on. What? Man, nothing's going on. Nothing's doing what I needed to do. We just lost it grouped it, but I didn't want it to. Hold on. If I ungroup it. Okay, now my mask is all goofed up. All right, so it's a process for sure, but it allows you access to a far more customizable, okay, now it's working. There we go. Far more customizable way to create these grain effects, create that 3D space, and add those aspects to your 6.3. And a little bit goes a long way. If you just add a subtle little bit of grain in this direction, you can then move it around. It's going to create the visual appeal that's going to draw your user, not your user, excuse me, that's web design, your viewer in and go, oh, what am I looking at? So it's very subtle adjustments. This is something that I want you guys to consider. There is also this video that walks you through it, a similar process. If you get stuck, or if this hasn't made sense, this is a little bit more refined. And you can see it in more detail on this right here. So what I want you guys to do, the remainder of the period, is keep working on 6.3, add some sections of this grain effect, add some sections of the gradient effect, the relationship from light to dark. And those are due tomorrow at midnight. So I'll walk around, help you guys with your individual questions, because this is a pretty specific tool set walkthrough sort of thing. So don't stress. I will help you. Okay, thank you for listening. We're off the air, so you can be back on your devices.